Picture this: 1,000 shades of amber and crimson trapped in glass, glowing under the flicker of a single bulb, each bottle a story I've never been allowed to read. My name is Dahlia, and at 36, I've built a quiet life in a countryside home that looks like it was painted into existence. Rolling hills, wildflower meadows, and a wraparound porch where the sunsets bleed gold. I share this slice of perfection with my husband, Victor, a man who could measure the world with a ruler and find it wanting. He's 42, a wine collector with a passion that borders on sacred. And if there's one thing he worships more than the vineyards we've toured together, it's the cellar beneath our house. That sprawling, dimly lit labyrinth of oak barrels and dusty bottles isn't just a storage space, it's his sanctuary, his cathedral, a place where time slows and every cork popped is a prayer. I can count on one hand the times I've been down there in our 12 years of marriage, and even then, it was always with Victor hovering like a sentinel, his eyes sharp, his voice low, guiding me through the maze as if I might shatter something irreplaceable with a single misstep. "This is a place of calm, Dahlia," he'd say, his tone almost reverent. "Order. Flavors that demand respect." I'd nod, feeling like an intruder in a world I couldn't quite grasp, the air heavy with the scent of aged wood and fermented secrets. That cellar, it's more than just a room. It's a forbidden realm, a mystery I've learned to live with, even if it gnaws at me sometimes. I've watched Victor descend those creaking stairs countless evenings, disappearing for hours, curating his collection with an obsession that feels almost personal. He emerges with a bottle or two, his face softened by some private satisfaction, and I can't help but wonder what he finds down there that he can't find up here, with me. It's not that I resent it, not exactly. It's just that his world of wine has always felt like a wall between us, invisible, but unyielding, a barrier I've never been invited to cross. And then there's Elias. He's Victor's business partner, a young wine expert who's been working closely with him these past few months to expand the collection. Elias is everything Victor isn't. Charismatic, quick with a laugh, his smile easy and warm, like he's always in on a joke you're dying to hear. At 29, he's got this effortless charm, a sharp wit that cuts through Victor's stoic reserve like a knife through butter. I've seen them together, heads bent over ledgers or tasting notes, Victor's furrowed brow loosening just a fraction under Elias's banter. It's strange, watching them. Victor's so controlled, so precise. And Elias is this burst of energy, unpredictable and bright. I find myself curious about their dynamic, about how someone like Elias can slip into Victor's guarded world so seamlessly. Tonight, though, I get to see that dynamic up close. We're gathered around the polished mahogany table in our dining room, the surface gleaming under the soft glow of flickering candles. The fine china is laid out with precision, each plate and glass placed just so, reflecting Victor's need for order even in something as simple as a meal. The warm light dances across the room, casting long shadows on the walls, and the faint scent of roasted herbs from dinner still lingers in the air. I sit across from Elias, with Victor at the head of the table, his posture as rigid as ever, though there's a spark in his eyes I don't often see. He's in the middle of a story about a rare vintage he recently tracked down, his deep voice resonating with a passion that feels almost foreign to me. "It's a 1961 Bordeaux," he says, his hands gesturing with a rare enthusiasm. "A true gem. Took me 3 years to find a bottle in pristine condition." Elias leans forward, his eyes bright with interest, nodding as if he's hanging on every word. Every now and then, Elias glances my way, tossing a playful comment like, "Dahlia, has he ever told you about the time he nearly bought a counterfeit just for the label?" I can't help but smile. the tension in my shoulders easing a little with his lightheartedness. Victor, though, barely acknowledges the interruption, his focus locked on the story of his latest acquisition for the cellar. I watch him, noting how animated he is, how his usually stern features soften when he talks about his collection. It's a side of him I rarely see anymore, and it stings a little, knowing that this excitement is reserved for bottles and vintages rather than the life we've built together. Over the years, our conversations have drifted into predictable patterns. His work, his cellar, the endless minutiae of wine. There's little room left for the quiet, personal moments we used to share. I sip my glass of red, the flavor rich and complex, and wonder when we started to feel like strangers sharing the same space. Elias, on the other hand, is a breath of fresh air. His laughter fills the room, bright and unforced, cutting through the heavy atmosphere like sunlight through fog. He's got this youthful energy that's impossible to ignore, a stark contrast to Victor's measured reserve. Where Victor is all sharp edges and control, Elias is fluid, unpredictable, his hands moving animatedly as he tells a story of his own about a vineyard mishap in Tuscany. I find myself chuckling, drawn in by his warmth, and for a moment, the weight of the evening lifts. After dinner, we indulge in a rich chocolate torte, the kind of dessert that feels like a sin to eat, paired with a dessert wine Victor insisted on opening. "It's the perfect compliment," he says, pouring a small glass for each of us, with a reverence that borders on ritual. The sweetness of the wine lingers on my tongue, a perfect harmony with the dark, velvety chocolate. But my mind is elsewhere. The conversation at the table has wound down, and Victor excuses himself to take a call, leaving Elias and me alone for a moment. The silence between us isn't uncomfortable, though. It's charged, like the air before a storm, and I catch Elias watching me with an intensity that makes my skin prickle. "You've never been down to the cellar on your own, have you?" he asks, his voice casual but laced with something I can't quite place. I shake my head, a little embarrassed to admit it after all these years. He leans in slightly, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "How about a private tour? I've got something to show you, something Victor hasn't even seen yet." My breath catches at the suggestion. The cellar is Victor's domain, a place I've always tread lightly, but the way Elias says it, with that glint in his eye, makes it sound like an adventure, a secret just for us. I hesitate, glancing toward the hallway where Victor disappeared, but the pull of curiosity, and maybe something else, wins out. "All right," I say softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Lead the way." We slip away from the dining room, the clink of glasses and the murmur of Victor's voice on the phone fading behind us as we approach the heavy wooden door that leads to the cellar. My heart is already thudding in my chest as Elias pushes it open, the hinges creaking like a warning. The narrow stone staircase stretches down into the shadows, and I feel a rush of cool, damp air against my skin as I take the first step. It's like stepping into another world, one I've only glimpsed through Victor's guarded lens. Each step down feels heavier, the air growing thicker with the scent of aged wood and fermented grapes, a heady mix that clings to the back of my throat. My fingers brush against the rough stone wall for balance, the texture grounding me as my pulse quickens. I can hear Elias just ahead, his footsteps confident, almost too at ease in this sacred space. The faint glow of a single hanging bulb comes into view as we reach the bottom, casting long, eerie shadows over rows of wine racks and barrels that seem to stretch endlessly into the darkness. The light sways slightly, making the shadows dance, and I feel a shiver that has nothing to do with the chill. I follow Elias deeper into the cellar, my eyes adjusting to the dimness, taking in the sheer scale of Victor's obsession. The racks are meticulously organized, each bottle cradled in its place like a treasure, labels yellowed with age, some so old they look like they belong in a museum. The barrels, massive and weathered, line the walls, their oak stain dark with time. I can almost feel the weight of history here, the decades of care poured into every corner, and it makes me feel small, like I'm trespassing on something holy. Elias stops near a rack at the far end, his silhouette framed against the dark wood, and I sense a strange tension in the air as I approach. It's not just the forbidden nature of being down here without Victor. It's something in the way Elias stands, the way his gaze lingers on me, sharp and unreadable. My skin prickles again, a mix of nerves and anticipation, as he turns to face me fully. He points to a bottle on the shelf, its glass so dark it almost looks black in the low light. "This," he says, his voice low, almost intimate, "is a rarity even Victor doesn't know I've sourced. A 1947 vintage, untouched by anyone for over 70 years. He steps closer, too close, and I can feel the heat of him, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the musty air. My heart is racing now, a wild drumbeat in my chest, as I try to focus on his words and not the way his presence seems to fill the space between us. Then, his hand brushes my cheek, a deliberate, feather-light touch that sends a jolt through me. I freeze, caught between shock and a surge of conflicting emotions I can't name. My breath hitches, and for a split second, the world narrows to just that touch, the cool dampness of the cellar fading into the background. But before I can process it, before I can even decide whether to step back or lean in, a sound cuts through the haze. Sharp, deliberate, the unmistakable echo of polished shoes on stone. My heart stops. Victor, he's here. I whip around, my pulse thundering in my ears, and there he is, standing at the base of the stairs, his silhouette framed by the faint light from above. His face is unreadable, a mask of eerie calm that chills me more than any outburst ever could. I expect rage, a storm of accusations, but there's nothing. Just that suffocating silence stretching between us, heavy as the air down here. My chest tightens, each breath shallow and ragged, as I wait for the inevitable. I've crossed a line, trespassed into his sanctuary, and worse, I've done it with Elias, under circumstances that must look damning. Victor steps forward, slow and measured, each click of his shoes on the stone floor reverberating like a countdown. My hands tremble at my sides, and I can't tear my eyes away from him, searching for any flicker of emotion. Anger, hurt, anything. But his expression remains impenetrable. He moves past me, his presence a quiet force, and stops at the wooden table near the center of the cellar, the very table where Elias and I had paused just moments ago, where this betrayal, whatever it is, unfolded under the weight of unspoken tension. My stomach churns as I watch him set a bottle down on the scarred surface, the dark glass glinting faintly under the swaying bulb. His movements are deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if he's performing some sacred rite. I can't move, can't speak, my body locked in place by the sheer intensity of the moment. I'm waiting for the explosion, for the sharp words that will cut through me, but it doesn't come. Instead, Victor straightens, his gaze finally meeting mine, and when he speaks, his voice is steady, almost too calm, like the still surface of a lake, hiding something monstrous beneath. "This wine," he says, his tone measured, almost thoughtful, "only opens in the presence of risk. That's exactly how I wanted it to breathe." The words hang in the air, cryptic and heavy, and I feel a shiver crawl down my spine. My mind races, scrambling to make sense of what he's saying. Risk? What does he mean by that? And then it hits me, a cold realization that steals the air from my lungs. He's not surprised. He's not caught off guard by finding us here, by the charged moment he must have sensed. He knew. Somehow, he knew this would happen, or at least suspected it, and that thought terrifies me more than any outburst ever could. I glance at Elias, desperate for some kind of anchor, and see him step back slightly, his usual easy confidence replaced by something else, something like quiet understanding, as if he's not just a bystander, but complicit in whatever this is. His eyes meet mine for a fleeting second, and there's no trace of the playful warmth I'm used to. Instead, there's a knowing look, a silent acknowledgement of something I'm not privy to, and it makes my skin crawl. I turn my attention back to Victor, my thoughts spiraling. What is this? Did he orchestrate this moment, this betrayal, for reasons I can't even begin to guess? Has he been watching, waiting, letting this play out like some twisted experiment? My guilt, already a heavy weight in my chest, morphs into something darker, a creeping unease that coils around my heart. I've always known Victor to be meticulous, a man who plans every detail, who leaves nothing to chance. But this, allowing, or even encouraging, a breach of his most sacred space, a betrayal of trust, it's beyond anything I could have imagined. What could he possibly gain from this? What game is he playing? And why am I only seeing the board now, when I'm already a pawn in motion? My eyes lock onto Victor's hands as they move with a precision that feels almost surgical. He reaches for the bottle on the table, his fingers curling around the neck with a familiarity that speaks of years spent handling such treasures. I watch, mesmerized despite myself, as he begins to uncork it, the motion slow and deliberate, like he's savoring every second of this strange, charged ritual. The cork resists at first, then gives way with a sharp pop that echoes through the silent cellar like a gunshot, reverberating off the stone walls and sending a jolt through my already frayed nerves. The sound hangs in the air, heavy and final, and I can't shake the feeling that something irreversible has just been set in motion. Victor doesn't flinch, doesn't even glance up as he sets the cork aside with care. Instead, he reaches for 3 glasses from a small shelf nearby, the crystal catching the dim light of the bulb overhead, casting fractured reflections across the table. My breath catches as I realize what he's doing. He's not just opening the wine. He's preparing to share it, with me, with Elias, as if this moment of betrayal, of trespass, is something to be celebrated. The thought twists in my gut, a sickening mix of confusion and dread. I want to speak, to demand answers, but my throat feels tight, my words trapped behind a wall of fear and uncertainty. He pours the wine with a steady hand, the deep red liquid flowing into each glass, glinting like fresh blood in the faint glow. It's mesmerizing in a horrifying way, the way it swirls and settles, dark and opaque, hiding whatever secrets lie beneath its surface. Victor slides one glass toward me, across the scarred wooden table, the faint scrape of crystal against wood cutting through the oppressive silence. My hands are shaking as I reach for it, my fingers brushing the cool glass, and I can feel the weight of his gaze on me, heavy and unyielding. I don't want to take it, don't want to be part of whatever this is, but I'm too frozen to refuse, too caught in the web of this moment to pull away. He hands the second glass to Elias, who accepts it with a nod, his expression still unreadable, that same quiet complicity lingering in the set of his jaw. Then Victor takes the third for himself, holding it up with a kind of reverence that makes my skin crawl. He raises his glass, the dark liquid catching the light as he tilts it slightly, and his eyes finally meet mine again. There's something in them now, a glint of something I can't name, amusement, perhaps, or something colder, more calculating. When he speaks, his voice is low and steady, each word carefully chosen, cutting through the haze of my thoughts like a blade. To risk, he says, his tone almost a whisper, yet it fills the cellar with an intensity that makes my chest tighten. It's the essence of life, Dahlia, just as it is the essence of a fine wine. Without it, there's no flavor, no depth, only stagnation. He pauses, letting the words sink in, and I feel a chill that has nothing to do with the damp air around us. I've grown tired of order, of predictability. I wanted to see how far you'd go, how far we'd all go, when pushed to the edge. His words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I stare at him, my mind reeling, trying to process what he's just said. A test. This was all a test, not just a moment of betrayal or a breach of trust, but a deliberate, twisted experiment to shatter the monotony of our marriage, to inject some kind of perverse excitement into a life he's deemed too stale. The realization washes over me with a sickening clarity, and I feel my stomach churn, bile rising in my throat. He's been playing with us, with me, manipulating every step, every glance, every word, just to see how I'd react. And Elias, my gaze darts to him, searching for some sign of surprise, of outrage, but there's nothing. He nods slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if he's been in on this from the start, a willing participant in Victor's game. I'm left reeling, the glass trembling in my hand, the dark wine within it threatening to spill over the edge as I struggle to anchor myself in this storm of revelations. The cellar feels smaller now, the stone walls closing in, the air thick with the weight of what's been uncovered. I take a shaky sip, the liquid burning down my throat, sharp and bitter, mirroring the turmoil inside me. The three of us sit there in a silence so heavy it feels like it could crush us. The only sound, the faint drip of moisture somewhere in the shadows, a reminder of time ticking on despite the frozen moment we're trapped in. I can't look at Elias, can't bear to see that knowing glint in his eyes again, so I focus on the table, on the scarred wood beneath my fingertips, tracing the grooves as if they might offer some kind of answer. The weight of the night settles over us like dust on the bottles surrounding us, a fine layer of something ancient and unchangeable coating every breath I take. I should feel guilt. I know I should. I should be drowning in regret for letting myself be drawn into that charged moment with Elias, for stepping into this sacred space without permission, for betraying Victor's trust in a way I never thought I was capable of. But as I sit here, the wine glass cool against my palm, I find myself admitting something I can't ignore, something I can barely whisper even to myself. I liked it. Not because of Elias, not because of some fleeting attraction or childish rebellion, but because it woke something in me I'd forgotten I had. A hunger, raw and untamed, for risk, for passion, for the kind of adrenaline that makes your heart pound so hard you feel alive in every nerve. I've spent years in this quiet, ordered life with Victor, tiptoeing around his rules, his sanctuaries, his need for control, and somewhere along the way, I buried that part of myself, the part that craves the edge, the unknown, the thrill of stepping into the dark and not knowing if you'll come out whole. This night, this betrayal, as twisted as it was, brought that part of me back to life, and I can't bring myself to regret it. Not entirely. I glance up at Victor, almost afraid of what I'll see, but his gaze has softened just a fraction as he finishes the last of his glass. There's a flicker in his eyes, something like satisfaction, as if he's found exactly what he was searching for in the way I've reacted, in the way I haven't crumbled under the weight of his revelation. It's unsettling, that look, like he's seen something in me he always suspected was there, something he wanted to unearth. And now that he has, he's content to let it sit between us, unspoken but undeniable. He sets his glass down with a quiet clink, the sound sharp in the stillness, and I feel the air shift, like a chapter closing, though I'm not sure what the next page holds. Elias clears his throat, breaking the silence at last, and mumbles something about needing to check on a delivery schedule upstairs. His voice is casual, too casual, as if he's stepping out of a role he's played long enough. I don't look at him as he stands, don't acknowledge the faint brush of his sleeve against the table as he moves past me. His footsteps echo up the stone stairs, growing fainter until they're gone, leaving just Victor and me in the dim glow of the cellar. His departure feels like the end of something, like his part in this strange, orchestrated drama is complete. And now it's just the two of us, left to navigate the wreckage of what's been done. The silence stretches again, but it's different now, more intimate, more dangerous in its own way, because there's no buffer, no third party to dilute the intensity of what lingers between us. Victor shifts in his seat, and I feel my breath catch as he reaches across the table, his hand finding mine. It's not a gesture of anger or accusation, not a demand for explanations, but rather a silent promise of understanding and the beginning of something new. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.